Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. We're going to give folks a few minutes. We're letting a bunch of people in. Thanks for joining us. And before I kick off, for those of you that can hear me right now and that have already joined, if you're open to doing video share, please do so. It's fun to kind of see other faces and feel like we're in a virtual room together. If you're not in the mood, also totally okay, which was me a couple hours ago. You'll also notice as folks are joining that as you join, you are automatically placed on mute. That is just because the format for this is a meeting room. And so sometimes there's a lot of background noise. And so we want to keep it easy for the speakers, easy for the folks, asking questions to kind of hear each other. But there will be a whole portion that is just pure Q&A. So as you get called on, we'll make sure to unmute you so you can participate. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes. We got a lot of wonderful folks joining. This is so good. This is so great. Okay, I think we'll kick things off a little bit. So hello, everybody. Welcome. You're all here, hopefully as part of the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge. And this is one of these kind of spontaneous office hours or Q&As that we decided to do. There was a lot of wonderful discussion after the last challenge, which is all about eliminating pesticides. And that was hosted by these two incredible women, Mackenzie Feldman and Sheina Crystal, the co-directors of Rewild Your Campus. And I just impromptu emailed them, was like, hey guys, do you want to do a Q&A? And they said, sure. And so here we are. And thank you so much for everyone for joining and for your interest. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep this pretty casual. First, the folks from Rewild Your Campus are going to share a little presentation, a little history actually about the incredible work that they're doing in the organization and the movement that they've started. And then they're going to share a little bit about their perspective on pesticides. And then we're really going to open it up to a Q&A. So with that, please, again, because this is a meeting room, there's a chat feature at the bottom. You can click on the chat feature. And first of all, please introduce yourself and also where you're from across the country. That's always fun context to know. And then feel free to start adding your questions now. So if you showed up to this because you have a burning question that you want to ask or something that you want to learn a little bit more about, put it in the queue and put it in the chat now. And after the presentation, we're going to start calling on individuals to then share their question with the broader group and hopefully tag team some answers. I will also say we might not have all the answers, right? There's still a tremendous amount of science and learning and so forth, but we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can. And no matter what, having these important debates and conversations is part of the journey. Before we begin, I'm also going to pass it over to Bram Gunther. Bram is the VP of Science for Planet Wild. And so given that this is a hotly debated topic, I just wanted to share a little bit of context before we begin. So I'll turn it over to Bram.
Thank you, Joe. And nice to see everyone on my computer screen. I want to, as Joe said, I am Bram Gunther, the Vice President of Science and Development for Planet Wild. I have had a lot of experience over my career with pesticides, but I'd like to start with Planet Wild's both physical and philosophical approach to pesticides. We don't use them. We don't believe we need to use them for the restoration work that we do. Between our best practices in site preparation, plant procurement, the way we install the plants and help maintain them over time, we don't need to use pesticides, which can be very harmful to local waterways and soils. That said, there are exceptions. Most of my career was in New York City, where I was the chief of forestry and natural resources. And I was tasked with overseeing and taking care of nearly 20,000 acres of green spaces across the city. And on that scale and scope, particularly when we were working in larger natural areas, whether it's forests or wetlands, we would not have been able to accomplish what we wanted to at the level and depth that we were looking to turn an or to restore an ecosystem without the use of herbicides. For example, there were sometimes 10 to 15 acre sites in New York City absolutely covered with weeds. The only things that were surviving were some of the bigger canopy trees. And to attack that, we did use the help of certain pesticides. There are other exceptions, using New York City as an example. The botanical gardens in New York City have collections. Obviously, they are not native plants and adjusted to local ecosystems. They are artistic collections. They use pesticides. There is a sort of priority for using chemicals if there are rat infestations in a particular neighborhood, or I should say in a park itself. But overall, in the city, again, using the city as an example, we have cut down the use of pesticides by 80% in the last 2 decades. What we have tried to do, the more we cut down on pesticides, the more we try to hire people with for green jobs, because the more people you have in a particular ecosystem after it's been restored, you can keep the invasives at bay through good gardening work and not using pesticides again. So that gives you a little bit of context for the debate about pesticides. And it is probably fun to say that Doug Tallamy and his wife have different opinions about how to use pesticides on their own land. Doug feels that it occasionally is worthwhile for practical and functional reasons, particularly if the invasive species is really at a large scale, and his wife has zero tolerance for it. So you can see it's not only a national thing, it's a personal thing.
Thank you, Bram. Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Mackenzie and Sheina, the co-directors of Rewild Your Campus. Oh, June, do you have to take them off mute, or can they take themselves off? She said 1 second.
Okay.
Sorry.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you, Ram. And thanks everyone for being here. I will share my screen now, and we have a few slides to present to you all. All right, so yes, me and Sheina here are the co-directors of Rewild Your Campus, and we're here to talk to you about week 7, eliminating pesticides. And I agree with everything that Bram said. It is a really nuanced issue. We're not here to present the issue as so black and white, but hopefully from this presentation, you'll just gain a bit of an understanding of why it's important that we eliminate pesticide use as much as possible and incorporate more native plants. And we're here to answer your questions at the end. We'll also preface by saying me and Sheina are not like land care experts by any means. We've both entered into this work first as advocates, and we've learned so much. And even though we can talk to you about the solutions, we might not be able to answer all of your specific questions, but happy to compile them and go back to our experts and get you some answers if we can't answer them ourselves. So about Rewild Your Campus, we are on a mission to turn college campuses into climate resilient, biodiverse spaces through organic land care and rewilding, and we'll explain the difference between those two. And first, just wanted to share a little bit about how this work got started. So it all started one day in 2017 on the beach volleyball courts at UC Berkeley. I was recruited to UC Berkeley to play beach volleyball, and one day when I came to practice, our coach said, if the ball rolls off the court, just let it go, because a toxic herbicide had been sprayed everywhere around the court. So hearing this news, I was obviously concerned, and so was my teammate, Bridget. And for me, I'm from Hawaii, and there, if you're not familiar, there's a lot of pesticide use that happens in Hawaii to test the GMO corn seeds resistance to pesticides. And so they spray 17 times the amount of pesticides in Hawaii compared to the US mainland. And it's for agrochemical testing. And so if you live near those sites, we were seeing really high rates of cancer and birth defects. And this was happening when I was in high school. So I became really interested in this issue. I learned a lot about pesticides. I didn't exactly know how to plug in, but then when I came to college and heard this from my coach, it felt like, okay, here's an opportunity where I can actually do something about this. So me and Bridget asked to connect with the grounds manager, asked him what he was spraying. He was spraying Ranger Pro, which is a glyphosate-based herbicide, essentially, very similar to Roundup, if you're familiar with Roundup. And we asked him if he could just not spray that chemical around our courts anymore. And he said, sure, I just don't have the staff to pick the weeds. And so we said, okay, we will pick the weeds for you. So that's what we began to do once in a while before practice. And he agreed he would never spray that area again. And Bridget and I decided from that moment that we would expand this to the rest of UC Berkeley's campus, because we were hearing that they were spraying synthetic herbicides around the whole campus. And this felt like we got something done in a fairly short amount of time. And we learned that if you come to a problem with a solution and a willingness to engage and be part of that solution, you can actually get a lot done. So we formed a student group. We got a grant to bring in an organic land care expert to train the grounds team on how to do organic on the 2 largest green spaces at Berkeley. This is called a organic pilot project, in which we will talk about a little later. But the goal is really to get the grounds team confident in how to do organic management. And then from there, they can expand this to the rest of their campus. So UC Berkeley became essentially completely organic. And I know, Bram, you mentioned, sometimes there's these nuances where a synthetic is more helpful than harmful. And so sometimes on the eucalyptus trees for fire mitigation purposes, like a synthetic will be applied. But what we're mainly focused on is areas where their students are spending a lot of time, they're laying on the lawn. These are areas that we feel should not be, sprayed with toxic chemicals. So we're happy with how Berkeley went. And from there, I connected with Sheina, and she was a student at UC Santa Barbara at the time, and brought this movement to her campus. And together we organized to get all the University of California schools to ban glyphosate from their campuses. And since then, we haven't looked back, and we've continued to expand. So our impact so far, we've protected 560,000 students annually from toxic pesticide exposure, almost 5,000 acres of land that's either been converted to entirely organic, or they've drastically reduced the amount of pesticides that have been used. And we'll talk a little bit about our certification. We've had 12 schools get certified, and we've reached over 500 people through our ground up advocacy boot camp. And yeah, here's some cool photos of, we'll talk about this Grinnell College in Iowa. They had a really awesome prairie project that was done on this piece that used to be grass, and it was turned into native prairie. And we're very proud of that project. These are just the schools that we're working with this year. To give you a sense, we really work all over the country. We are an all-women team of 7. So we're fairly small, and we're spread out all over the country, and try to work with as many schools as possible. So just to, give you a little bit of information here, I don't know how much you all know or are familiar with conventional versus organic land care. Feel free to, comment in the chat if you have extra questions about this, but just we're gonna explain a little bit about the difference between conventional, integrated pest management, what we mean when we say a product swap, what organic land care is, and then finally what rewilding is. Rewilding is the best, right? That is, we're taking lawn, maybe we're converting it to native plants in a way that's organic and biodiverse. And we'll just go into it. It'll be easier if I explain one by one. So conventional land care relies on the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. That's, a typical green lawn space that you might see on a campus or a golf course, usually they're sprayed with these synthetic products, and it really prioritizes short-term thinking. Like it's like a weed will come up and then you're gonna spot spray that weed, as opposed to investing in kind of longer soil health that might prevent that weed from coming up in the first place. So kind of think of it as, your body, you get sick, you take an antibiotic, as opposed to all the proactive things that you can do to prevent yourself from getting sick in the first place, like exercise, like eating healthy, etc. And conventional land care, is detrimental to our soil health, to our planet. It limits the soil's ability to sequester carbon, extremely dangerous for wildlife and, of course, humans, especially the workers that are handling these chemicals themselves. A big inspiration, I didn't mention this, but a big inspiration for us is Lee Johnson, the groundskeeper who ended up getting diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and sued Monsanto. And he won a big case because the court was able to prove that Monsanto, with their Roundup product, their glyphosate-based product, knew that this caused cancer, and they decided to hide that from people. And this worker, he's still alive, but he got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And just thinking there are thousands and thousands of people like him that are exposing themselves to these chemicals every day. And so when we think about this issue, we really want to think about and prioritize like the health of the workers. So a product swap, you might think, okay, I want to switch to organic. I'm just gonna, turn in all my conventional products for organic products. But we are really trying to say that is not the solution. It can be a solution. If you want to just purchase all organic products, you can do that. But it will tend to be more expensive and altogether less effective, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're focusing on the soil health. If you have questions about this, please put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. But I'll explain kind of the difference between an actual organic approach. So an organic approach really means, taking soil tests, finding out what's happening in your soil, and then switching your cultural practices. So instead of applying a synthetic pesticide, like an herbicide to kill weeds, you're doing other cultural practices instead. So maybe you're overseeding with grass seed to crowd out the areas so the grass can grow thick and outcompete the weeds. And keep in mind, this is when we're talking about a lawn. So yes, we don't love lawns. We're not promoting lawns, but our work is focused on college campuses, and for better or for worse, they do have a lot of lawns. And so if they're going to have a lawn, we want it to at least be organic. So when we're talking about organic land care, we suggest, changing the mowing height and mowing a little higher so that you're keeping those strong root systems, you're aerating the soil to reduce compaction, and then maybe you are hand pulling the weeds or doing another sort of like mechanical weed control, you're applying a compost tea, etc. So these are all just different approaches. It doesn't necessarily take more labor. It's not going to be more expensive. If anything, we've seen that the cost actually goes down by a third after a couple of years, and it saves a ton of water. But there is this initial investment in just teaching workers how to do something completely different than what they were doing in the first place. So here's some of the pilot projects we have going on right now around the country. And what happens is we bring in an expert. The workers take soil tests, they ship it to several labs, and then our expert will look at the biology and chemistry of the soil test results, and then come up with a plan based on those specific areas of what the workers should be doing. And then from there, they learn how to do organic, and they're able to take this to the rest of their campus. And I will now turn it over to Sheina to finish out these slides.
Thanks, Mackenzie. That was great. So yeah, once we have kind of done work to eliminate pesticides, or kind of simultaneously as we do that on college campuses, we also promote rewilding. And the reason I say once we've eliminated the pesticides or simultaneously as we eliminate the pesticides is because we see a lot of schools moving to plant natives without addressing the way that they are maintaining the rest of their green spaces. And this creates landscapes that look like this. I'll just go to the next slide quickly. Or Ken, can you go to the next slide? that looks like this on the bottom left, where you have a rewilded site that is just across the sidewalk from a lawn. And folks aren't thinking about the way that the chemicals they're putting in their lawn are impacting the wildlife that might be coming to campus to, you know, enjoy the rewilded site. And so ultimately you're kind of like creating this trap for wildlife, right? They come to campus or they come to your garden and they begin to enjoy the native plants that you've planted in your yard or that a school has planted. And then when folks go out and spray a chemical, those, you know, bees, bugs, butterflies, insects are exposed and suffer the consequences of that exposure. So we want to really kind of be doing both at the same time at the very least. And in terms of like why rewilding, I mean, I think I'm preaching at the choir here because you all are in this webinar, but there are 40 million acres of lawn in the US, and that is just like a mind-boggling statistic. I recently was on a flight and like as the plane took off, I looked out my window and it was just like lawn, 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 and more lawn. And it is like so absolutely crazy that that is just our default landscape, and kind of we don't take it for granted. And so I appreciate you all being here and like doing this Less Lawn, More Life challenge and working to do that rewilding. That's so critical. But yeah, we're working to reintroduce native species to an area, promotes biodiversity and ecosystem health, and just generally like on college campuses specifically and in your own home too, like rewilding a site will create less work in the long term because you don't need to go out and mow it frequently. You don't need to you know, necessarily care for it as intensively as you would a lawn. So it's a really great alternative to a lawn for many reasons, both for your own like labor and cost and also for the planet. And Grinnell College is a like great example of a school that we've done some really exciting projects with. We started off doing rewilding projects with Grinnell. We worked with some students to rewild this 5,000 square foot prairie that was in the center of campus. It was just a underutilized area of lawn that was kind of sandwiched between these 3 sidewalks. And of course, it's surrounded by lawns. So students weren't congregating or hanging out or playing Frisbee on that smaller section. They were doing it on the bigger sections. So it was like one of these areas of lawn that we're all too familiar with that are just like not used for recreational activities. It's just there because that's just what we think to plant. So the students really got together and started to kind of challenge that idea that lawn should be the default landscape when there's areas that are not used for recreation. And they started a campaign called Too Much Grass. And they worked with the school and the horticulturalist at Grinnell who like worked in their prairie because they have a whole prairie program to procure native seedlings and kind of create a plant, right place charts. That way they could make sure that the plants were planted well next to other plants and would get appropriate sunlight and resources. And I will note kind of to our conversation at the start about like kind of when pesticide use is appropriate and when it's not. That was kind of an interesting conversation around this site because the horticulturalist was basically like, okay, we'll use glyphosate to kill the lawn before we plant the prairie. And the students, having kind of come from our programming, heard that and said like, wait a minute, that kind of goes against everything we're promoting here with this site, right? Like we're working with this group that is adamantly against pesticide use in most situations. Like how do we kind of navigate this? And so we met with the students and we brainstormed alternatives, and the students actually came up with the idea to use sod cutters, which the school had, to cut up the grass. And I guess luckily for the students, there had recently been a storm in Grinnell that had resulted in a lot of downed trees that had created lots of areas in folks' lawns that needed filling. So the students kind of coordinated with the local community. People came and like took away the freshly cut up sod. The students were able to get in some nice compost and soil to fill in the inches that had been removed. And then they planted the native seedlings right into the fresh soil. No herbicides required. So I think this is just kind of like an example of sometimes when it might take a little extra work or a little ingenuity or a little extra time, but it is totally feasible, especially this is like 5,000 square feet. It wasn't like a gigantic project. So it was definitely possible to do this without pesticides, but it is kind of sometimes the default, and sometimes it's appropriate to challenge that and to say like, what are other viable alternatives that we can employ to achieve the same result? And I will just note that the school has a couple other native prairie projects that they have done. And I think a couple of those had been established using glyphosate to kill the turf grass. This is before we kind of got involved, and the staff has noted that this prairie has had a lot less weed pressure, and we think it's because the soil is healthier, because the soil wasn't impacted by a huge spray of glyphosate before the prairie was planted. So there can be benefits to your rewilded site beyond just like not exposing yourself to these chemicals. There can be benefits for the site a couple years down the line, when you don't interrupt soil cycles with chemicals. Our just kind of switching gears for a sec, to cover one of our programs, we created this program, the Green Ground Certification, to kind of benchmark different places or different categories for schools to kind of aim for when they are working towards chemical elimination. 4 levels, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. We've certified 12 schools. The platinum level is 100% synthetic pesticide and fertilizer free. And I think that's really exciting because when we work with schools, the main argument we kind of hear is that we could never do this. No one's doing this. We could never go 100% pesticide free. That's crazy. So that was one of the reasons I created this certification, is because we knew that there were schools that were doing this, and we wanted a way to really highlight them and uplift them and be able to showcase the work that they're doing to other schools. And the gold level is 90% synthetic pesticide free. And we've certified UCLA at the gold level and UMass Amherst and Colby College up in the Northeast. So I think we have a good geographic spread, because that's another common concern is like, oh, well, we couldn't do that in my microclimate or in our, ecosystem area. This is impossible. But it totally is. And I think all these schools kind of are helping to show that it is possible and pushing the needle forward. And I'll just flag that we are kind of in the process of expanding our certification beyond schools. We're certifying our first museum and a nature center in Connecticut. So I don't know if folks on are maybe associated with a property that belongs to a business or an institution or a place of worship or a medical campus or a tech campus. I mean, there's all these other kinds of like campuses, right, beyond schools. And I think folks don't necessarily think about the land that is surrounding these areas or these campuses, but they often have land, it is often lawn, and it is often treated with pesticides. And so this is a good way to kind of begin a conversation maybe at your place of work around how they're managing the grounds there. And I'll just quickly talk about Drexel University, because I think this school is a great example of how our programs work together. So Drexel in Philadelphia, we began working with students there in 2022. They came to our Ground Up Advocacy Bootcamp, which is a virtual programming we put on twice a year, mostly geared at students, but open to community members as well. We spend half of it talking about the pesticide issue. The slides that we've included today are like pulled from some of our bootcamp presentations. So we kind of really dive a lot deeper into what we've covered in the last like 15 minutes. And then we spend the second half kind of talking about ways that students and community members can activate themselves in their communities to advocate for chemical reduction. So looking at key stakeholders to do outreach to, forming a campaign strategy, and kind of figuring out how to best approach folks in your networks about chemical reduction. So the students came to our boot camp and we worked with them to kind of launch a campaign at Drexel and begin talking with the grounds team and having conversations around what it would look like to do a pilot project on a park in Drexel's campus, and to begin to pilot organic land care and test the soil and like how that differs from conventional land care and what the benefits would be. And so kind of a year after our conversations began, the Drexel grounds team agreed to pilot organic land care on Drexel Park, which was a park associated with Drexel's campus that's managed by their grounds team, but also used by the public. And they thought this would be a good site because it's often a place that folks walk their dogs in the morning and bring their kids to play in the park. And so it kind of got a lot of community use, and also kind of maybe was exposing some of those of us that were like most at risk for chemical exposure, like pets and young children, to chemicals. And so they thought this would be a really good place to start. And after only a year of employing organic land care principles like overseeding and aerating, the grounds team decided that they were so impressed with the results that they were going to eliminate chemical use on the rest of Drexel's campus. And on Earth Day last year, they announced that they were transitioning the entire campus to organic land care, which was really exciting. And then just this past April, kind of a year after that announcement, Drexel applied to and received our green ground certification at the silver level, in recognition of their hard work. And they kind of sought out that certification as a way to like hold themselves accountable in the transition, and kind of to benchmark their progress towards it, which we were really stoked about. So I think this kind of shows how a lot of the different programs that we've talked about today kind of work together in our work with students and staff on campuses. So now just for you all, as Mackenzie said, we're not 100% experts, but we have, through our work, kind of seen some really excellent alternatives to pesticides for your lawns. This is probably going to be more specific for folks on this call and hopefully more relevant to you all than some of the stuff we talked about for college campuses. But the best alternative we've seen is to learn to welcome weeds into your lawn. Besides maybe that initial reaction that folks who are used to a manicured lawn have when they see a lawn with clover and dandelions, like truly what's the harm? Oftentimes these plants are actually pretty beneficial. Clover, for example, fixes nitrogen into your soil, which can eliminate the need for a fertilizer. Dandelions have a variety of medicinal benefits, and you can use them to make tea or dandelion green salads. So I think kind of one of the main ways that we can reduce pesticides is by rethinking kind of our expectations of our landscape. And instead of expecting weed-free green spaces, we can just begin to celebrate the fact that it is green and lush no matter what is planting there. And clover makes for just as good of a place to like kick a soccer ball around as lawn does, or to have a picnic on, or to read your book on. So that's like the best alternative for your lawn, probably, is just to accept some weeds. But we understand that that's not for everyone, and some folks really care about having minimal weed pressures in their lawn. So if you still want to reduce weeds in your lawn, we would recommend overseeding with grass seed at the right point of the year, and kind of when your grass is ready for it. We would recommend mowing a little higher, a little less frequently. Usually above 3 inches is good for organic turf. It enables the roots to really grow deep, so the grass can focus, because when grass is mowed really short, it gets stressed and it focuses on growing up to get taller, and does not focus on growing a deep and vast root system. But once grass is tall enough and happy with its height, it can focus on growing a deep root system. And that's how you can reduce weed pressures, because if there's a thick root system, there won't be space or resources or nutrients for weeds to grow. You can aerate when your lawn is compacted. So if your lawn gets like a lot of use from kids playing on it or people laying on it, you might need to aerate it, and that helps bring nutrients and sunlight and oxygen deeper into the soil. You can apply compost or organic fertilizers as necessary based on soil test results, or you can use OMRI certified organic herbicides as needed in your lawn. And when it comes to rewilding, I think kind of with the Grinnell example, and as we've talked about, I think this can be a bit of an area that sometimes folks can get behind using pesticides for in the short term, for like longer term gains of integrating more native plants into the landscape. But hopefully in your lawn, unless you have like a massive property you're looking to rewild, it should be pretty doable to do a rewilding project without chemical inputs. You could solarize your lawn, where you put down some tarps and kill the lawn with sun and heat. You could dig out your lawn, which I know was demonstrated on like the Good Morning America segment that Planet Wild did. You could use sheet mulching. You could overseed natives directly into patchy or thin turf. You could focus more on planting the right plant in the right place, or hand weeding weeds once your rewilded area is established. So, or you could get a sod cutter, although I know that's not like a piece of equipment that's necessarily accessible to homeowners the way it is to universities, but maybe you could like rent one at a Home Depot or something. But yeah, I think there's just a whole kind of variety of alternatives to chemical use when it comes to doing smaller scale rewilding projects that we'd encourage you to explore before reaching for something that could harm your health or wildlife's health as well. And yeah, as I mentioned, we do our boot camp twice a year. Our next one's coming up August 18th, I want to say. So if you have a phone and want to take a second to scan this QR code, it'll take you to a place to sign up for our next boot camp. And like I said, yeah, it's geared towards students, but totally open to community members. We every year have a good amount of community members on. And I think that the information is useful to everyone. And we'll dive much deeper into kind of the stuff we briefly touched on today. And we'd be remiss not to plug our newsletter. So if you want to kind of stay up to date on our work and see the schools we're working with, or if you have ideas you want to share or whatever, you can sign up for our newsletter here. Yeah, that's the presentation. Would love to open it up for questions. And if you want to like email us, our email's on here, or follow us on Instagram, or TikTok, if any of y'all are on TikTok. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Mackenzie, did you want to say something?
Oh, just earlier I saw Carol's point about like us using the word pesticide and herbicide interchangeably, and just wanted to clarify that for people who aren't familiar. So yes, pesticide is the umbrella term, right? Aside is anything used to kill. So when we say pesticide, that's the umbrella. And then underneath that could be herbicide, which is a chemical used to kill weeds. It could be fungicide used to kill fungus, fungi. It could be a insecticide used to kill an insect. So we are mostly focused on herbicides, and we're mostly looking at weed management. And so we do tend to use those terms interchangeably. So a lot of times people will say pesticide, but they are referring to a weed killer, not necessarily something to kill insects, but it can be confusing. So yeah, I appreciate that point. And yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, let's open it up to Q&A, and that's a great one to start with. And can we, June, can you unmute Bram too? So
Graham should be able to unmute since he is yes,
Great.
he is. Okay, great.
So everyone can just hop in, but first I just want to say thank you so much, both for the presentation, but also your incredible work. I mean, this is like hugely inspiring, and the dent that you've been able to make, and just the way that you approach this is it's inspiring. It really is. And I think all of us that are, it's the same lesson, right? Us in our homes, in our neighborhoods, or, communities, or wherever we are. It's about how do we involve the community and kind of share. And yes, sometimes there's a problem, you got to solve it, but let's think a little bit differently if we can, for everyone's benefit. So you guys are just doing amazing work, really. So yeah, let's open it up. Bram, on that question, in terms of herbicides and pesticides, we do get a lot of questions. Do you also want to just chime in on that before we move on to some other ones? And then I'm going to let June just sort of run some Q&A and call people up if you guys are okay with it. If you don't mind, if you put in a question in the chat, if you're open to sharing your video when that moment comes, that's awesome. If not, that's okay as well, but we'll have you share your question again.
I don't really have much to add to what Mackenzie said. She's right. Pesticides has become the broad term. But yes, if you are looking to use a particular chemical or product in a particular way, that's when you need to be specific about your terms so you can buy the right thing, if that's what you're doing. Or on the opposite, if you want to understand what's being used on the land and advocate against its use, you should know the difference between the broad term pesticide and, let's say, an insecticide, but otherwise have nothing to add to what she said.
Okay, thanks, Bram. Sheina and Mackenzie, that was great. Thank you so much. We do have some good questions. That one was the big one, but we have a lot of specifics now around particular types of pesticides and pests. So just again, we may not have all the answers, but we'll go with it and see what we do. Sheina, you're unmuted. Good. Okay, so Robin Allman, I'm going to ask you to ask your questions.
Hi there, thank you. At our Greater Richmond Wild Ones is promoting the use of buckets of doom, which is water, straw, and then a quarter of a mosquito dunk, which is Bacillus thuringiensis. We're concerned that the Bacillus thuringiensis may harm dragonflies, and I've seen extremely mixed research on this. I was wondering if you all had any insight into that. Thank you.
I know personally don't have any insight. I'm not sure. Can definitely ask around though and get back to you if you want to leave your email. And I don't know if Planet Wild folks have
We
any
do.
answers to that. Okay,
Well,
cool.
no,
Then
we
I'll
don't
send it
have the
over to-
answers, but we can get in touch with Robin to
Okay,
give that
cool.
in.
But I will confirm that the literature is mixed. I have skimmed the literature in the past and I saw how mixed it was. So it's hard to really tease out what you think is the right answer for mosquitoes. On the land, in a more manual way, of course, depending upon the size of your land. If your size is huge, you do need help. But if you have a small contained piece of land, you can control some of the water spots where mosquitoes are going to naturally breed. So that's a nice way to handle it with your own two hands. But again, if the size of your land is manageable in that way.
Great. Thanks, Bram.
And Planet Wild, you'll share these questions with us after too, and then we can ask some experts and get back to you.
I'm
Okay,
pulling them
perfect.
all together.
Perfect.
So here's some fun ones. Let's see. Nancy Sharp has a few. So Nancy, I'm gonna get you unmuted, and why don't you ask your questions about how to deal with some of these lovely little creatures. Are you able to
I think I'm here.
yeah, there you are. We hear you. So you recall what your questions were?
She's muted.
Oh, she muted herself again. Okay, hold on a second. One more time. There we go.
Sorry, I clicked audio too many times. My first question was any suggestions on how to deal with moles, MOLES, and then also aphids and scale.
I saw your aphid question earlier and I texted one of our experts to see what he was thinking about that. For moles, I don't know. Castor oil seems to be a natural repellent that is suggested. I don't know if you've tried that before, if that has worked.
We've used it with voles, VOLES. We haven't used it with the moles yet.
With moles, okay. And then, yeah, I don't know if like any sort of physical barrier have you tried, I don't know, some like underground fencing or things to sort of physically try to keep them out?
They're in the yard. So, you know, we do have some turf lawn and you can see their tunnels. They're outside of a raised bed. I haven't seen them inside the raised bed, but around the outside of that.
Got it. I know you could try planting some natural deterrents like daffodils or marigolds or alliums. I don't know if that would help, kind of planting those around your lawn, as those are like mold deterrent plants.
I'll try anything.
Let us know how it goes.
Okay, thank you.
We'll keep asking around for you as well.
Thank you for that too.
So we have a good question from let's see, Suzanne Altman. She's not coming up though, so let's see. Yeah, she must have left. I will ask the question though. It is, could you please discuss neem oil? I don't understand how it can kill diseases, but it's safe for plants, insects, and wildlife.
Yeah. I don't know, Sheina, if you have anything
Yeah,
to share with that.
Jen, I guess it was the question in the chat. I just want to.
It was in the chat. It was, can you please discuss neem oil, NEM? And Bram, feel free to pipe in too if you.
Yeah, I can just say, like, I mean, this neem oil is similar to other, I mean, the reason why organic pesticides are non-toxic compared to synthetic, right, is because like one, they're biodegradable, they don't persist in the environment, like it's like low residue, so it's not it doesn't remain in the environment like synthetic pesticides. And I don't know, neem oil has been shown to be, I don't know the exact scientific reasons why, if it's just because it's naturally occurring, but it is safe for pollinators and is shown to be non-toxic for birds and bees and beneficial insects. So yeah, there shouldn't be any worries with it. I don't have like much of a better scientific answer beyond that, but obviously with anything, like overusing any sort of chemical might not be great. And like, you still want to be careful when you're handling chemicals for your own skin and things like that. So yeah.
All right, I have a question from Glenda Dyson.
It is, let me just add a little bit to
Yeah.
Mackenzie's previous answer. In by and large, across the board, you know, organic, I'm going to use the pesticides in the broad way here, the broad term, is safer than using the concentrated chemical products that are traditionally used. However, the issue with using any kind of product or concentration of even organic chemicals is it's hard to control them. And Mackenzie mentioned, you know, how much you're going to use, that you have to be very careful. You don't want to overuse it. It can also burn the soil, burn the plants in the soil. So you just want to be careful, even if you're using organic materials, which are definitely better and safer for the plants and for the people and pets that use that area.
Okay. Thank you, Bram. Glenda, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, we have 8 acres of land and we have lots of animals and like a small farm, but we have some gravel walkways through our garden and through from our house out to the barn, and the weeds just grow up in that gravel. So my question was, is there something I can do to kill those weeds that is safe for the environment besides short of just pulling them?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I would say that might be a good reason to use inorganic herbicide. I don't know, Sheina, what you would say, but I think like, and when we say organic herbicide, you look for like the OMRI listed, OMRI, or there's other ones that are 25B exempt, but you can tell if it's organic if it's OMRI listed. And I think in that case, it might be okay to spray that there. There's also people can make I don't know, I've seen a lot of people do like DIY vinegar mixed with boiling water to pour on weeds if you don't want to buy anything. And that seems to work well as well. And then also, you know, you can try mulching and cut out cardboard layers and layering that to stop the weed growth. Shane, I don't know if you have any other
Yeah,
thoughts.
I would add, you could try boiling water.
Yeah.
I know that works on weeds. And then you could also just like consider adding more gravel to your gravel path to make it thicker. So that way there's less of a chance that weeds poke through. So adding a
Okay.
couple inches of gravel to the path. But yeah, I think like a vinegar spray or mix, boiling water, I think there's definitely a lot of at-home kind of
I think
concoctions that one
some of
can
the
make.
some of the at-home things though use salt and dishwasher soap. And I mean, I've used it and I've just seen earthworms just die right before my eyes when using that. So I don't want to use that because it'll kill the
Yeah.
earthworms.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe just the boiling water.
Someone also wrote in
And-
chat something about corn gluten meal, and that won't kill existing weeds, but that can act as a pre-emergent to prevent future seeds from sprouting. So that could be an idea if you're pulling them and then trying to prevent future
Okay.
weeds as well.
Yeah, and I would just add that you could try like raking the gravel as a way to disrupt weed growth. And it sounds like your weed growth is pretty intense, but if it was minor, I would also suggest just hand pulling it.
Yeah.
And I guess as another alternative, and this is potentially not feasible for you on your 8 acres, but you said you have animals. I don't know if you have goats.
We
but
do.
goats are excellent weed eaters.
Yeah.
So you could set those goats on your gravel path and let them chow down on the
Yeah.
weeds. And
True.
goats' digestive systems are really interesting because they neutralize kind of the seeds. So with other animals, the concern is like they eat the weed and they poop out the seeds, and so they're just kind of proliferating the weed growth. But goats won't do that.
Yeah.
So they can eat and poop in the same place, and you won't be promoting weed growth. So maybe let your goats have at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. There are a few people have asked this question, and I guess this is for everyone. What about if on the lawn that you do decide to keep, are organic fertilizers okay? In terms, so just on the lawn, we're not talking about native garden beds or anything like that, but are the fertilizers okay? Oh, you muted yourself again. Don't do that.
I'm so sorry. It's such a bad habit on Zoom. Like the minute I'm done talking to mute myself so I just don't get background noise. I'm sorry, June.
That's okay.
Yeah, in terms of fertilizers on your lawn, I think the important thing to do before you fertilize is to soil test. And that is like a pretty, I think across the board, a principle of organic land care, because the concern with fertilizer is that you might add the wrong nutrients or over nutrient your soil that can result in runoff, a nutrient runoff, which can, result in eutrophication of waterways and algae blooms, etc. So I think it is a totally like normal component of organic turf care to add organic fertilizers. And I think like compost-based fertilizers can be a great alternative. And some, I don't know, folks here have like at-home composter things that can kind of like create your own compost or own fresh soil to put down. But yeah, I think testing your soil is really important, because you don't want to be adding more nitrogen if your soil has enough nitrogen, right? Then you're just kind of like contributing to nitrogen pollution in our ecosystems. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Kenz or Brown.
No, that's great. Yeah.
And Jackie Lathrop has a question. Jackie, are you available?
Oh, and can I just call out that Nancy, yeah, left in the chat. I've heard that the best fertilizer is to let the grass clippings stay on the ground. Yeah, that's a great way to help nutrients stay in your system. And I feel like we've seen that with like the Leave the Leaves campaign too. So in the fall, when leaves fall, just leaving them too.
That's what I was going to add. So I just want to underscore that there are ways around having to choose to use fertilizers for your lawn by keeping the natural organic, either dead trees, dead plants, or their leaves on site. They are natural fertilizers, natural mulch, and nutrients into the soil.
Jackie, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, and one of them was about woody plants showing up in our prairie. It's a large area, and we can't clear cut. So what would be some options for that?
Did you all hear that?
I did not.
Okay,
No.
so planting a prairie with invading woody plants like walnut, honeysuckle, multiflora rose, they can't clear cut. So do you have any recommendations for how to manage those invasives?
Well, if you're talking about getting rid of trees that I'm assuming are not naturally in the habitat that you're restoring, using a New York City example, we would stump cut those trees. And in many cases, we would put a glyphosate material just on the stump cut itself. So it decreases the chances that it will leak into the soil. You're not spraying it into the air, which happens a lot. And that's really when you can't control some of the bad effects of these chemicals. So if it is the right ecological thing to do, by removing those species, do your best to stump cut them. You can have volunteer days where you can have maybe hundreds of people even, and you can just, each person is responsible for 2 to 3 trees, although you will have to have some certified pesticide applicators on site. Each state has their own application system, because you're going to want to follow a set of guidelines and rules that already exist.
Thank you.
Are you able to do like for other plants getting in the prairie, like is prescribed burns permitted?
It's difficult because we're right next to a residential area and the winds are always the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Got it. I know at Grinnell, they do like community weeding days too, where like they'll get a bunch of students to come into the prairie and, for a couple hours and just pull the weeds like that they do every, I don't know, few months or something. I don't know if you have access to like community members who you think would want to come and help with that. I know that's not like a long-term solution, but.
All right, I'll think about that one.
Thank you. Diane Cornell, you have your hand raised. Would you like to, I can certainly unmute you if you'd like to let us know what your question is. Diane, can you hear us? Can you speak? Okay, let's see. The other question was, the one remaining one that I've seen that we might want to talk about is Veronique Pittman. If you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, hi.
Hello.
Yes, I do have quite a lot of the Japanese beetle, and I'm just wondering for the grubs. I mean I've only been told to scatter milky spore on the ground. I don't know how else to get rid of them. Do you have any advice?
Yeah,
Sorry.
for the grubs, you could use some nematodes. We know that folks have had success with that. I don't know if Rom or
Okay.
Mackenzie have anything to add, but that's one thing I would definitely suggest.
Nemasek, yeah, I've been told to use, is that considered-
Beneficial nematodes.
Sorry?
They're called beneficial nematodes.
Right. And you think that that'll do it alone?
For the grubs, I feel like
Okay,
my understanding with the beetle is you have to kind of get it in the grub stage, and then it gets much harder once they've matured. But I don't know if
right, yeah, the grubs, that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to, yeah.
Yeah.
I have personally, I'm not the expert here, but I have personally a few years ago used the beneficial nematodes just in a garden area, and it did seem to work, and I didn't seem to, but I don't know I don't know if the nematodes are selective in what they're eating, if they're just so that is something to research and find out more about.
Okay, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Looks like neem oil might work for that as well. I don't know if you've
In
tried
the
that.
ground, so
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how you would, the grubs are just like literally in the soil, so it's not on a plant.
Okay. So I think I'm getting to most of the questions. If anybody else has a question, if you want to use the raise hand feature, I can see your hand go up, and then we can wrap it up. Okay, I think that was most of them.
I'll just also say, is it Veronica?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, I saw your comment about
problem.
the black tarps like leaching microplastics. I think that's a great call out. And I feel like that's like totally a typical thing folks reach for. So thank you for like flagging that.
I
think
learned the
there's-
hard way.
Yeah.
Believe me.
Because they totally disintegrate and
They
it is totally
do. It's
plastic. Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. So I think folks here should look for alternatives to that wherever possible, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mackenzie and Sheina. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you everyone for joining. And we're gonna send out the recording because I know a lot of people registered. It was a last minute decision for us just to kind of do this impromptu. So we'll make sure everyone gets the recording. We'll get the FAQs into a document. We'll push them out. Ladies, can you share those 2 links with me? I do want to make sure we'll include it in our newsletter, your not only your upcoming boot camp, but also your own newsletter. Want to make sure that we distribute that as well afterwards to everyone that was interested in this, okay?
Yes, sounds great. Thank you
Awesome.
all for showing up.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Awesome discussion.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.